Welcome, mortals. I trust you're having a lovely, spooky season. Well, today we're doing another Sylvanian makeover, so all I can say is, welcome to Transylvania. So in case you hadn't noticed, I love Halloween, and I've fallen in love with these Sylvanians as well. So I thought it was only appropriate to do a haunted house makeover of this lovely little house here. I thought it was very good because of the nice tall spire, and it's just sort of long and thin, and I think has the potential to be very spooky. And also, who's going to be living there is this lovely little black cat family. So keep that in mind for when we're doing more of our stop motion Sylvanian stories. So the first step for this project is going to be spraying it with a black spray coat primer, which I'm going to do in the dungeon slash the workshop, which is dark and has no lighting and is full of spiders, so very seasonally appropriate, but I won't be showing you that, frankly, because I'm scared that the camera equipment will be eaten by spiders if I leave it in there too long. So join me in a moment when this is spray painted black and we can get on to the fun bits. It's now the next day and you can see our lovely black house, which is already looking quite cool, but the masonry is a bit too regular. I want this to look old. I want this to look like a converted castle, essentially. But the archaeology brain in me is saying we need some masonry, so this is just bits of egg box that I've ripped up. You can tear it into strips and then rip it up further, just into the sort of little shape of rocks and size of rocks you want. I've got some bigger ones and some smaller ones, and again, it might be the archaeologist in me again, but I want this fabric of the tower to look older than the rest of the house that's been built around it. So I'm probably going to use larger courses of stones just to make some differentiation in there. So once you think you have enough masonry going on, you're just going to take some glue and put it onto the surface, spread it out thinly, and just start gluing up in courses. Hello, friend. We'll have to kick you out, aren't we? Not a place for you, there's cats in here. So it's now a good few hours later and you can see that our house is now completely covered with little bits of egg box or masonry, and I'm completely covered in little black bits of glue, which is always good fun. So we're going to let this dry down completely so that nothing comes off, and then we'll start by painting up this masonry. So this has now been drying for a couple of hours and it's time to paint our individual stones. So I'm starting off with just this tower here because I want it to be a slightly lighter colour than the rest of the castle. So I'm starting off with just this grey. It's a straight up mixture of black and white. Normally in art you wouldn't do that because it deadens colour, but for a haunted house that's exactly the effect that I'm going for, and it should make the colours that I am using pop a little bit more. So I'm just doing sort of every other stone in this particular shade, and I'll add a little bit more black to it to get a little bit of differentiation between the different stones. And don't worry to start off if it looks quite clean, because by the time we're done with this, it will not look clean at all. So I'm not worrying too much if I get paint anywhere else, because this is the first layer of paint to go on and everything else is going to be painted over. So now we just add a tiny drop more black and carry on. It shouldn't make too much of a colour difference. And now that the tower is done, we can get on with the rest of the building. So it's now the next morning, and this is how our castle is looking so far. So we're just going to go in with a much darker grey and just go into the roof and finish that off. And then leave that to dry while I'm at work for the day. So we're now back from work and everything's dried, so we're going to start on the dry brushing and weathering process. So I'm just using a slightly lighter colour, wiping off most of the excess, then very lightly brushing over the high points where light would catch. So our last job for the night is just to paint all these frames and wood and stonework in with a pure black rather than anything mixed. So it's a brand new day and we're now going to start working on our detail work. So we're going to start off by dry brushing around these window frames and things. Then we're going to add lichen and rust spots and things like that. I wanted to think about how this would form. I want this to look like a really old building. And obviously lichen doesn't just stop at the window frames. That's why we're doing it in this order. And then we're also going to paint this door as well and try and pick out some of the lovely details on this. I think it looks sufficiently spooky that we don't have to change the pattern on any of these. Well, now that it's black anyway. So, let's crack on. I've decided to do the door in a really dark purple. You can't really see it as it dries out, but it will once we do a bit of dry brushing and bring out everything. So we're going to start off with some rust spots in places, mostly around the windows where water would drip down and also a little bit on the roof. And now it's lichen time. So now we're going to dry brush the door to pick out the little details on there. I've accidentally not filmed half of this, but I'm using this brass paint just to highlight a few things on the door. We've now finished all of our most of our painting, but I'd like some slightly more 3D foliage. So what I've done is I've cut up some little bits of embroidery thread just to make some moss, which we're then going to glue onto the building with the last remnants of my glue. And I'm just spreading it out using a, what we call cotton bud, but I suppose for my American friends is a Q-tip. And just do it in sections. Don't be tempted to put all your glue on and then put all your moss on. And just pop that on and press it in. I don't want to entirely cover all of the painted green patches, but moss and lichen does tend to grow in the same sorts of areas, so it's understandable that that's where you'd find things. If you find there's too much in a particular patch, you can just sort of fluff it around and move it. Like that. Now we crack on with the rest. I think the house is now looking really nice with all its foliage, but I would like a nice sort of trailing ivy all the way up this tower. So what I've got here is just some embroidery thread in a couple of different colours, which I've twisted together and then stained. So I'm just twisting it together and then using this hot glue gun to attach it to the house. Now, I've never actually used a hot glue gun, so this will be a learning experience for all of us. So I'm doing the start point is I've got a knot just at the end here. So I'm going to tuck that under where I want this to start. And we'll hot glue that in place, and I'll turn this on its back so that I can work around a bit more easily without having to fight gravity. So all I'm doing here is just twisting it and then gluing it up where I want it to go. I have very faintly marked the vague outline of where I want this to go, just in a white pencil. So let's get cracking. So first ever attempt at hot gluing. Twisty twisty little embroidery threads. This is going to be messier than I expected. Oh, I think this might actually work. Excellent. So now I've got to a point where a bit splits off and goes another direction. I'm going to quickly unravel part of this and separate out one of my strands, which is easier said than done. This is actually 6 strands altogether. So this little separate strand or branch, we're going to bring it round over there. And when they get thinner, I might use these for my own personal safety. Not sure what to do with all this hot glue gunk, but it might be useful for cobwebs or something. So when we're getting to the natural kind of end point of one of these, I'll split this even further. I'm just going to snip off the excess ends and clear up any glue as well. So this is now our full vine in place. I think already looks pretty good, but obviously it needs some leaves. So here are my little leaves. I'm going to mostly use these dark ones because I think they're most like ivy, and I'm going to mix in a couple of these lighter green ones for a bit of variety, and again, because it's autumn, a couple of these nice brown ones. So I'm going to use actual ratios so that if I need more I can mix it again. So this is my teaspoon. So we're going to take 2 level teaspoons of dark leaves. To 1 spoon of lighter leaves. And about half a spoon of orange leaves. Looks like a good ratio to me. And we'll start sticking them on. So I'm really just hot gluing around the points where I think there would be leaves in as natural a way as I possibly get. And then sprinkling on leaves. Hoping this might also cover up some of the worst sort of hot glue exposed bits. Now, I'm not expecting all of these leaves to stick, so I'll take them off later. So that's our ivy on. Then we can just give it a little shake. And there's our ivy. And I think it looks rather effective. So I'm going to keep the remaining mix of these leaves and these vines for part 3 of this video series, which is going to be landscaping around our haunted house. So while that glue is drying, we're going to do the final touches on this weathercock with our bronze paint again. So now all our painting and decorating of the exterior is done, apart from the landscaping, which we'll do in part 3. So it's just time to add some final touches. And there we are, the exterior of our haunted house. So, my spooky loving friends and Grebo loving friends, this is part 1 of our Sylvanian haunted house complete. Join me next week when we'll be doing the interior of the haunted house, and in case you can't find my videos in the future, please do hit the subscribe button so they'll be recommended to you next week and for the rest of the month. We've got a lot planned for spooky season. Have a good night and sweet dreams.